Welcome to those of you who are looking to get the truth and vital information that you want to find on the internet, but really have a hard time finding it. So today we're going to share some of that with you. Now, today's sponsor is RE/MAX Champions. The content on this video is neither endorsed or supported by RE/MAX Champions, although they probably should if they knew what was going on. But nevertheless, we are part of the RE/MAX Champions family here and love bringing you information and all sorts of things related to real estate, but mostly related to the world, because we're passionate about America. We're passionate about and excited about where we're heading in the future of America. And we want to just bring a little common sense to you. So let's go ahead and jump right into some of the stories that are in the headlines today that are trending. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you go to Google and you look at what's trending, you got to really look, because about all you see is sports and Taylor Swift. And of course, Taylor Swift is huge because she is a Biden supporter. So when you go to places like Google, expect to try and find news that, well, guess what? It's just not going to happen. So that's why you're here, and I'm going to share it with you. Oh, here we go. Miss Nancy Pelosi. Now, normally, I would probably be a pretty big critic of Nancy Pelosi. And in fact, I'm probably a pretty big critic of Nancy Pelosi across the board. But like a broken clock is right twice a day, right? You know, it's sitting there and it says it's 12 o'clock. Well, it's 12 o'clock at night and it's 12 o'clock in the morning or afternoon twice a day. So what am I talking about here? Well, Nancy Pelosi's asking for a probe into the protesters that are calling for the ceasefire in Gaza. Now, her motives may be completely different, but the bottom line is I think we need to know who these people are, who's financing them, who's paying for them. Because if you go out on the streets and you talk to the protesters and you ask them about Gaza, about the Palestinians, they don't have a clue. They don't have a clue that in World War II, a majority of the Palestinians sided with Nazi Germany. That's right. They sided with the Nazis. A lot of the Palestinians that were there. Now, there were a couple thousand that joined the Allied forces, but guess what? They, in most part, defected and went over to the rest of the Palestinians that were supporting Nazi Germany. And when the world was split up after World War II and these properties were assigned to the Jewish people that were decimated, millions of people killed at the hands of these Nazis, hey, the Palestinians didn't like that. They said, oh no, we should have continued eradicating them. And when you hear these sayings like from the river to the sea, that's exactly what they're talking about. They're talking about eradicating the entire Jewish state. Does that make sense? In this day and age, it's horrendous. So when you talk to these people that are out there, they don't understand. They don't know. So are they being paid to present these opinions? Are they just lemmings that are following everybody and they hear something on the internet or see something on Facebook that says, hey, we're going to have a protest, and they're like, hey, I'm all for it. I'm going to protest. I don't think so, because if there was a protest for supporting the Second Amendment, you wouldn't have people organically joining like that in these crowds and these numbers. So Nancy Pelosi's right into looking at it. And you may say, well, what is the other thing you're talking about where Nancy Pelosi was right? And that was when she visited Taiwan. Now, I think the military-industrial complex is really starting to get exposed, and I don't want to see wars, but yet we seem to be in wars across the globe. In fact, I think we are in World War III right now. We just had another troop killed over in Israel. We're bombing the Houthis without going through and declaring war. We're just arbitrarily sending up missiles and bombs and bombing sovereign countries. We find out that we've got troops stationed in Turkey or in Syria, and all of a sudden it's looking like we are in World War III. So where am I in support of Nancy Pelosi? That was back in the day when she visited Taiwan and China said, we're going to shoot the plane down. Guess what? China doesn't tell America what we're going to do, who we're going to visit, and who our politicians are going to talk to. And they certainly have no right in threatening to take down a U.S. politician, no matter how vile and despicable they are. I think that they were elected by American people, and that is an extension of America that they threatened to shoot down. So I supported Nancy Pelosi's right to do that. You see, that's kind of a difference between the right and the left. The leftists just follow along the playbook no matter what, without regard to the facts. If that's the story of the day, they're on board with it, they support it. As a conservative, as a person that looks at the actual facts, I'm going to tell you sometimes I agree with some of these nutcases. Hey, Elon Musk, I agree with him a lot. However, I think he's a little too closey with China. So I don't understand enough about those relationships, but he is a global businessman and he seems to be doing more harm than good. And maybe some of the inroads that he's making in China will get support from the average Chinese person. I think the average Chinese person is a very good person. The Chinese Communist Party is very evil, but it's a very small percentage of the actual population of China, and they are suppressing, they are killing, they are organ harvesting from individuals like the Uyghurs who are Muslims in China. So a lot of bad things that are going on. And I don't know. I don't think that we should be complicit in what's going on. I don't think we should be supporting the regime. We need to be careful about it. So what are Musk's activities over there? Well, he needs them for a lot of manufacturing and you know, that billion-person market, which has got a lot of the globalists looking at China saying we got to be friendly with China. And ironically, it's the first company, or it's the first country that would be up in line in arms to take away everything from the countries that invest in them. So it's very short-sighted to be doing business there, but nevertheless, it's a place where some companies feel they have to do business. So take that with a grain of salt. On the flip side, Elon Musk has certainly been outspoken on a lot of things that are going on, and he's kind of freed Twitter to the extent that I'm seeing a lot of things on Twitter that you normally wouldn't see. So, you know, what's the trade-off there? Is it worth it that we've got somebody that's doing business and cozy with communist China, but at the same time making America stronger by encouraging free speech? You know, I have to lean towards freedom and towards free speech. So that's the bottom line. And Nancy Pelosi, good for you for calling out, investigating to find out who is behind all of this stuff going on in Gaza. And you may look at it and say, man, you're wrong about that. Anything that Nancy Pelosi has her fingers in is bad. You're wrong. But I'll tell you, at the end of the day, you cannot argue that Russ is right. So here we go. Today's teenagers are disillusioned about politicians. They're disillusioned about everything, really. And why is that? Well, a lot of them get their information from TikTok, which is run by the Communist Party of China. Is there any surprise? A lot of them have been brought up in educational systems that literally communists have infiltrated. We've taken God out of the classroom. We were founded as a Judeo-Christian society, and we've been slowly stripping that away. So there is no promise of the things that Jesus Christ has offered us, such as eternal life. So when you say these teenagers are disillusioned, of course they are. We've stripped away the things that has made America great. We've stripped away personal freedoms. We've increased surveillance to an extent that it's actually scary. There used to be a show on called Person of Interest. I urge you to binge watch that show. That show ended because I think it struck too close to home, and it's probably been 10 years or more since that show was produced, but it was right on when it talked about artificial intelligence and the surveillance world that we're under, and the agencies that are undermining American democracy by stripping us away of our rights for freedom. The deep state, if you want to call it that, if you want to call it globalists, I don't care what you call it, but the bottom line is we find out that these agencies were spying on presidential campaigns, that they were involved in so many different things, the Russia collusion hoax, and all of these different things that are going on. Of course, teenagers are going to be disillusioned. Hey, I'm disillusioned by a lot of stuff that we see. So what's the answer? The answer is education. The answer is getting them introduced to things that tell them the truth. And what is the truth? It is hard to find. In fact, if you go to Google and you look for things that are trending, the first 50 things that are trending all have to do with sports or Taylor Swift or Kelsey or all of these other things. They don't have to do with real life. If you look at what teenagers are looking at and listening to, that tells you a big story. One of my mentors, Jim Rohn, used to say, you know what? Who are you listening to? Where are they taking you? What are they teaching you? And is that all right? And when it comes to our teenagers in this world, it's not the parents that are teaching them. It is a lot of leftist organizations, starting with the mainstream media in the news, that are filling our kids' heads with so much garbage. How could they not be disillusioned? If you're a parent, you need to step up and you need to talk to your kids. You need to take control. Don't leave it to the news. Don't leave it to their teachers. Don't leave it to the educational system. That is your responsibility to make sure that our children understand the greatness of this country, which is America. And you know what? I think that we are suffering some of the worst times that I've ever seen in my 62 years here on earth of what's going on in the United States of America. But I will tell you this, there is no other place that I would rather be. There is no other country that I have more hope for than I have in the United States of America. And I have that hope because of things like this, things like the internet that let people bring their thoughts into action, things that we didn't have 10, 20, 30 years ago or more. We used to listen to the talking heads and we had to believe what they say, and we don't have to do that any longer. Are we where we need to be? No, we're not. But are we headed in the right direction? Absolutely. Well, we often hear it say that America is the breadbasket of the world. We produce a lot of food, and a lot of times people are talking about it and saying, well, you know, we got to cut those greenhouse gases. We got to back off on everything. Here's what I want you to realize. You know, America is the number one producer of corn, which means ethanol, which means high fructose corn syrup, whether you believe in it or not. Personally, I'd prefer not to have it, but we're also a top producer of sugar and other sweeteners. And here's what you need to know. We have less than 1% of our population involved in agriculture, producing some of the largest numbers the world has ever seen when it comes to corn and when it comes to other things that we produce, we use, we consume, and we export. And if you look at that and say, oh my gosh, you know, you're contributing to the greenhouse effect so much, just think about this. 1% of the workforce is involved in agriculture, yet we are providing the world with so many different things. In other words, we are very highly efficient at what we do. But when it comes to greenhouse gases and the greenhouse effect, think about this. Well, annual greenhouse gases from the year 2022 and on, if you look at the graph, you say, oh my gosh, you know, where are we? 53% or 53 billion tons of greenhouse gases are being emitted. And as America, we've got to do something about it. Well, would it shock you to know that of all the greenhouse gases that are produced worldwide, that means if we look at the volcanic greenhouse gases and everything else, 53 billion tons, well, that's a lot of greenhouse gases. And the U.S., how much does it produce? 4.99 billion tons, okay? Less than 10%, 0.9% of the greenhouse gases. So if we were to stop our production of food, if we were to stop our driving, if we were stopping doing anything that produces greenhouse gases, the net effect on the world is less than 10%. But yet when you read the media, when you look at the reports, you think, oh my gosh, America, you're responsible for destroying the climate, for destroying the world and doing all of these things. Well, we're only about 10%, folks. Why don't we focus on the countries that are producing 90%? Well, you're not going to hear that. You're not going to hear Greta Thunberg on her yacht or flying around on her private plane complaining about the 90%. You're going to hear her talking about the industrialized nations and, most importantly, coming down on big, bad, rotten America that is producing about 0.9% of the problems that we see in America. You're going to hear about. So when we think about this, 57 billion tons of greenhouse gases, and America is responsible for 4.99 billion tons of greenhouse gases. That's less than 10%. In fact, that's around 9% of the greenhouse gases created in the entire world. So if we were to stop everything that we do in the United States of America, if we were to basically cease living, evacuate the entire country, let it go back to God's land and buildings, it still wouldn't even get rid of the greenhouse gases because as the streets decay, as the buildings fall, they're still going to release greenhouse gases. But having the most industrialized number one country in the world, we still only produce less than 10% of the greenhouse gases that are out there. So don't be fooled into thinking we're such an evil, rotten, miserable, nasty country, because we are the greatest country on earth and we have done things to reduce greenhouse gases. Our companies have responded by making sure that we are environmentally conscious. So don't think about America as being such a big, bad country destroying your planet. Think about America as a responsible steward that produces an awful lot of what gets used globally, and we do that with a lot of environmental consciousness. So all you have to do is look at the numbers, but you have to dig for them. You're not going to find it on the Standard News. You're not going to find it on ABC News or anywhere else. The bottom line is this: we do pretty well with what we do here in America. Let's talk about wages. Oh my goodness. Inflation is up, prices are up, people are having a hard time, especially here in Florida. We've seen prices go through the roof, but the bottom line is, how have businesses responded? They've responded by paying people more than they've been in the last 20 years. Of course, with the Biden economy, we've got to do that. You got to pay people more. And something I want you to consider when you think about some of these minimum wage laws that are going in, I don't know how happy you are about them. I know I don't like to walk into a Walmart and find only one human being at the checkout line and having all of these automated tellers that are there. I'm not getting a discount for using them, even though they don't, Walmart doesn't have to pay for employees because they've got these kiosks that are really actually bleeding them money when it comes to theft and anything else. I'm kind of a jack of all trades. I do all sorts of things. And one of the things I hate is going through those automated checkout lines for two reasons. Number one, you know what? Give me a discount if I got to check out my own stuff. And number two, every time I go through, the red light comes on because I've got a can of lacquer thinner to do some painting projects, or maybe I have spray paint or have glue or have alcohol, heaven forbid. And then what has to happen? everything's at a standstill until a human being finally sees that red light and comes over, swipes your card, checks out the information to check me out. You see, I need the human being anyway. So those kiosks, those robots aren't completely replacing everyone. They're creating havoc with the shoppers. They're creating havoc when it comes to theft control. But we're going to see more and more of this as minimum prices, as minimum salaries, as minimum salaries go through the roof. And you have to wonder, why is this happening? You know, who is this hurting when it comes to raising the minimum wage? Well, the minimum wage being raised isn't hurting a company like Walmart. It's not hurting Amazon. In fact, it's benefiting those companies because they could do things like shedding employees and going to automated systems and putting in robots to stock the shelves and putting in kiosks to check people out. The same thing with McDonald's. Who's it hurting? It's hurting the small employer. It's hurting the Ace Hardware around the corner. It's hurting the little consignment shops that are selling things and have to pay their employees $15 or more an hour to get employees. In fact, it's putting them out of business. And what happens when they go out of business? Well, people go to the big box stores. They go to the Walmarts. They go to the Best Buys. They go to the Amazon to buy their products. So of course, Amazon, Walmart, the big global companies support these outrageous minimum wages that do nothing but kill the small businesses, that kill the companies that are struggling to survive in the marketplace. They kill the companies that are right down the street from you that you should be supporting but can't support because they can't stay in business and pay those types of wages. So when you hear them talk about raising the minimum wage, understand this: minimum wage has never been something that you're supposed to live on. See, in our country, in America, where you start is not where you stay. You have the ability to change employers, but more importantly, you have the ability to add more value to your employer. And the more value that you add, the more money you're going to be paid. And how do you get that value? You take courses. Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, has more things than you could ever imagine learning, and they're online and they're free. One of my hobbies is trying to learn all sorts of different things. So I've been looking into and reading and studying and taking courses on quantum mechanics, things about warping time and wormholes, things about nuclear power, and all sorts of things that, you know, they may not make me more money in learning them, but here's the great thing. My main gig is real estate. And when I go out there and I'm selling a house, I can relate to all different types of people. I can talk to that trucker who's driving an 18-wheeler and tell him, yeah, years ago I used to drive an old 72 white with a 671 Detroit and that big Bakelite steering wheel. If you didn't weigh 200 pounds, that truck had busted air assist steering. You hit a bump, it would spin you right out of the seat. And you know what? The truckers knew what I was talking about. And I can relate to those people. I've brought more value to the marketplace. And by bringing that value, I'm able to relate to more customers and to make more money in real estate because I've gone out and I've improved myself. I've worked on my sales skills. I've worked on the personal development. I've worked on all of those different things to bring more value to the marketplace. So why am I here doing a podcast? Because I want you to do the same thing. I want you to go out and improve your skills. I want you to be able to offer more to the marketplace. I want you to broaden your horizons because guess what? If you're doing the things that everybody else is doing, well, you may be replaced by the things that everybody else is going to be replaced by, and that's artificial intelligence. Now, understand, artificial intelligence is neither artificial or intelligence. Right now, the biggest thing on the block is ChatGPT. And what is that? It's just an aggregator of information that's already out there. It goes and it looks for things and it studies them and it puts them together and somebody asks a question and it says, hey, here's what the answer is. It doesn't create the answer. It gives you an answer from things that are already out there. So if you want to increase your wage, Learn how to use artificial intelligence. Don't be intimidated that it's going to be replacing you, but do understand if you're in certain types of jobs, you may be out of a job based on two things, based on the minimum wages going through the roof and based on artificial intelligence replacing a lot of the things that the average person may be doing in their job. So make sure that you're working harder on yourself than you are in your business. And that is what's going to bring value to the marketplace. That's what's naturally going to drive up all of the wages. Now, a lot of people are fearing, saying, oh, we need a universal basic income because artificial intelligence and robots and all of these things are going to replace all the workers. And what are we going to do? We've got to give them money. Here's what I want you to understand. If we took all the money in the world, confiscated it from everyone, equally distributed to every man, woman, and child globally, 5 to 10 years, all that money is going to end up back to where it started from, because the people that are bringing the value to the marketplace are the people that are collecting the wages. Not all the time. There's some folks that just got lucky. There's some folks that inherited money and got into positions. But by and large, the people that are the movers and shakers and the thinkers, the people that are ruthless businessmen like Bill Gates, who took a product called QDOS and hacked it and turned it into MS-DOS and presented it to IBM when the owners of Digital Equipment decided to go out and go fishing and just stood up the people at IBM. You know, little acts like that are the things that made all the difference in the world. Now, you know, when it comes to Apple, hey, great products, the iPhone and everything like that. The operating system that you're used to seeing on the Apples was basically an idea of Xerox Corporation. And for whatever reason, they let Wozniak and Jobs wander around and take a look at what they were doing, and they took those ideas and they integrated them into the next computer, which, you know, now we know, hey, who's the 800-pound gorilla on the block? It's Apple. And does Apple care that minimum wages are going through the roof and people are being displaced in America? No, they're using Chinese labor at pennies an hour. They're using slave labor over in China to produce products that are coming over here in America and killing jobs. So, you know, think about that. If you want to bring more value to the marketplace, don't do it by arbitrarily forcing the government to raise those prices, because when that happens, the only thing that's happening is it is hurting the people that you think that it is intended to help. Those are the people that it is destroying by raising the minimum wage. So think about that. That's what I've got to say. Now, you may argue with me. You may say that I'm wrong, but you know, at the end of the day, Russ is right, and you're going to hear that a lot. So look here, the House is putting together impeachment articles. They're putting together articles about impeaching Biden. They're putting together articles about impeaching Mayorkas. Now, do these people need to be impeached? They need a lot worse than that, but this is the problem. It is absolutely dumb to create these situations that are no-win situations. And I think, well, I know absolutely it's done for political purposes. The Republicans think that they can get their base behind them by going after Mayorkas, because we know that illegal immigration, particularly with most Republicans, every conservative, is something that people are concerned about. But do you really think that we're going to impeach Mayorkas? Do you really think we're going to impeach Biden? The Senate's never going to go along with the impeachment. Not going to happen. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of effort. So stop with these ridiculous impeachment hoaxes and get to work on the business of the American people. Put together laws, put together rules that can actually be passed. And if they can't be passed, I'd rather you shut the damn government down and not do anything, because you know what? The last government shutdowns that we have, it didn't affect me. Now, I feel bad for the veterans that wanted to go to the National Cemetery and were told that they couldn't go. It seemed like some of the things that happened during the Obama administration were the things that were done specifically to hurt groups of individuals, not because they made economic sense, but because it was politically political folly, and we've got to get rid of the political folly in America. Now, there's no way that you could say that I'm wrong on this, because you know in the bottom of your heart, Russ is right. Well, here's a great story. ABC News could hardly contain themselves when they broke this news. Let's listen.
Welcome back. In today's Spotlight, jurors have ordered Donald Trump to pay more than $83 million in writer E. Jean Carroll's defamation case against him. The jury awarded those damages after Trump repeatedly called Carroll a liar, after she had publicly accused him of sexually assaulting her in a department store dressing room in New York City back in the 1990s, and a jury already found that she was telling the truth, that he had done so. He continued to defame her, and that's what happened today, the jury walloping Trump. So let's bring back the panel. Mike, Barbara, Heidi, and joining this one, ABC News legal analyst and trial attorney, author Brian Buckmeyer. So Brian, you know, we all often look at a big verdict like this, say, well, jury's sending a message. What's the message this jury is sending?
The message here, I think, is especially on the focus of those punitive damages that rung to the tune of $65 million.
I'm sorry. I just can't listen to this anymore, because, you know, these journalists, they're such investigators. You know, we've got Carol out here saying that she's going to do something good with that fortune. Yeah. Well, you know what? Don't start spending that money anytime soon, Miss Carol, because we're going to find out some of the things that you see in the mainstream media might be a little bit different than what you expect. Now, you could go to Google and look for pictures of E. Jean Carroll, and you're going to see pictures like this. She looks kind of glamorous. She's dressed professionally, and they take the worst picture they could find of Donald Trump, and they're out there. But understand this, you know, Trump was always a big figure in New York City. He had people around him left and right. And here he is being alleged of raping somebody in a major department store. Now, do you really think that he wouldn't have had an entourage around him in a major department store, that it wouldn't have been a really big deal? And furthermore, do you really think Trump does his own shopping? This is kind of ludicrous when you really start to think about it. And you say, well, you know what? A New York jury convicted him. Yeah, of course they did. They didn't vote for him. Yeah, they convicted him based on a lot of things that they saw. You know, when you look at pictures like this, you say, oh, wow, you know, I could see why Trump may have gone for her. She's not a bad looking woman. The reality is, this is what she looks like in real life. She's kind of a nutcase. That's her house. She's written slogans all over everything. When you look at the inside of the house, she looks like a frickin' hoarder. It's really despicable. This isn't the type of woman that Trump hangs around with. And you could go back to the 90s and look at her, and you got to say, well, you know what? I'm not quite sure, when he's got a Melania Trump available and those types of people, that he would be messing with somebody like this, number one. Number two, she doesn't know when it happened. She doesn't know the date. She doesn't know most of the details, and yet the jury convicts him. So, you know, that's not the worst of it. You know, when it comes to this, in my opinion, nutcase that is going out there, you got to say, well, how did this happen? You know, if Trump wasn't guilty, how in the world did this person win in court? Well, we're finding out some information. You see, the judge and Miss Carroll's attorney happen to have some history together. In fact, they got the same last name, even though they're not related. But all of a sudden, we find out that about the time that this supposed rape happened, that the attorney for the prosecution worked at the same law firm that the judge was a partner. Now, before you say, wait a minute, it's a big law firm, they don't know who's there. Well, because of ethics rules, the judge had a duty to disclose that. And this just wasn't any attorney that was working in the law firm. We find out that the prosecutor's attorney was being mentored by this very same judge, and it was not disclosed at trial, which is another ethics violation. So what does that have to do with court? Well, it has everything to do, because the judge sets the rules on what evidence can be admitted. The judge sets the rules on what can even be said during closing arguments. In fact, the judge sets the rules on what type of defense can actually be offered. So does it matter if the judge has a personal, long-term, long-standing, deep relationship with the prosecution attorney? Gee, do you think that might create some conflict of interest? Whether or not that conflict of interest was there or not, that judge had a duty, had a responsibility, a legal responsibility to disclose that. Did he disclose it? No, absolutely not. He did not. So, Miss Carol, I've got some advice for you. Before you start spending that money, you better hold off a little while, because I could be wrong, but I don't think you're going to see a dime. And as you start to study this case, you're going to learn that Russ is right.